Hello, everybody. Welcome to tonight, which is on the simple and powerful and emotional skill of forgiveness. I see on tonight's live chat, on tonight's live stream, if you're watching this later, you're going to realize that you've missed out on an incredible community that is developing here. On tonight, I can see we've got in the house, we've got Colorado, Greenville, South Carolina, we've got Nebraska, we've got Kansas City, we've got Maryland, we've got Delaware, Ohio. I'm coming to you from Charlotte, North Carolina. And we are discussing like all of these skills, I actually think. These skills are words that we've heard before, but not necessarily that we've trained for and practiced for and built into ourselves. Tonight is a great example around the simple skill of forgiveness. And I want to jump right in tonight. One, I'm going to be more efficient with these and keep these on track and on time. I want to get to your Q&As, and I want to be very direct tonight. And for those of you that were here last night or you watched the previous video, I challenged and I encouraged everybody to come tonight and either bring somebody with you or invite other people. And if you didn't bring people in here tonight and you're watching this video later, I'll encourage you the same. Share this with someone. Share this with people that you care about. Share this with people that you lead. Share this with family. Share this with somebody you think might be carrying a grudge or some resentment or something inside that maybe they just need permission or some insight or direction to let go of, because that's where this begins. If you are here live tonight, before we jump in, if you are here live tonight, jump into the chat and let everybody know where you are from. I love what's going on here right now. We've added, or I'm finding out, I'm seeing that we've got, what do we have? We've got Georgia in the house, Portsmouth, Ohio, Michigan, Rockford, Illinois, Cleveland, San Diego, West Coast showing up. These evening sessions are probably easier for you West Coast folks who don't necessarily rise early in the morning for these. So anyway, jumping in tonight, as always, I am working from the Essential 2020 Guide to Self-Awareness, Self-Control, and Self-Confidence. It's a workbook that I've put together for all of you who decide to join the Daily Discipline community. It is 20 trainable behavior skills that unleash greatness. And tonight we are on the 10th skill, and that is the skill of forgiveness. The simple skill of forgiveness is releasing yourself from a burden of unnecessarily carrying a weight for someone else. And it is recognizing that that decision is entirely up to you. You see, the thing about forgiveness, and I asked a question tonight on Twitter, and the question I asked is, why do people find it hard to forgive? Why is it that we choose not to forgive, thinking that we are somehow doing something to somebody else, and we withhold forgiveness thinking that that somehow gives us something? What is that? Why is that? Why do we do that? And there were really interesting answers tonight. And I think the one that jumped out to me the most, or at least the theme that jumped out the most, is that withholding forgiveness can feel like we maintain some control and superiority over someone that we believe wronged us. And it's not the way it works. Because the way forgiveness actually operates is that when you don't forgive, and I do want to put this out from the beginning, this is not a suggestion that you need to forgive, because you don't. This is not a coaching of telling you what to do or who to forgive or how, none of those things. What I want tonight to be is I want this skill to be a recognition and a realization to a pathway that exists for you if you want it. And that recognition is this. First, forgiveness is a one-party act. It does not need to involve two parties. The other person who you forgive does not need to know that you've forgiven them. They do not need to apologize. They do not need to understand. They do not need to be aware. Forgiveness isn't for them. Forgiveness is for you. And that's the first and most important piece. Forgiveness isn't for the other person. It's for you. It's for your heart, and it's for your emotions. And that is enough for a lot of people to realize and say, I'm not doing something for somebody else. I'm doing something for me. Number two is that forgiveness, whether we're forgiving people for their faults or for their mistakes, it's one of the most important, unique, and profound capacities, abilities that we have as human beings, is that we can, by choice, forgive somebody who's hurt us. We can forgive somebody who has made mistakes. We can forgive somebody who has caused us deep and immense pain. It's the fact that we have the capability that means we need to look at it and make a decision for ourselves about whether or not we really want to use that. And then the last piece that I wanted to lay out is that when we don't forgive and we hold on to it, whether it shows up in the form of resentment or anger or that thing that stays inside of us and gnaws us. The important piece to understand is that when we refuse forgiveness, we really only damage one person, and it's not the person that we intend. The only person we really damage is ourselves. And so if you only make it through 6 minutes of this, the message I want you to leave with is that you don't have to carry the weight. You don't have to hold resentment. And forgiving is not an act of weakness. It's an act of strength. Forgiveness is not the coward's way. Forgiveness is the warrior's way. It is one of the most timeless displays of strength that we can have. And you can choose it any time you want for your reasons. And you don't have to announce it. You don't have to tell the other person. You can, but you don't have to. Forgiveness is something you can just do in isolation for yourself without ever revealing anything else, just to clear your own mind and clear your own heart and clear your own spirit. Whatever that is, you can clear that for yourself. So, this simple act of recognizing that this is about you and where forgiveness comes from. The teaching point around this is that a lot of times when you look at somebody going into forgiveness, they will involve the other person. They will, prior to forgiveness, they will put up hurdles, right? They will put up checkpoints and gates and if-thens, and it's something like, right? The norm or the average is something like, I will forgive you if you apologize, if you acknowledge what you did, if you understand the impact, if you're truly sorry, then I'll forgive you. And if you listen to that, in that scenario, who is in control of you? Like, who has control over what's going on inside of you and whether you do or don't do something? It's not you. It's the other person. If this scenario was, say, me that wronged you, and you tell me that the only way you forgive me and the only way you are letting go of that view of me and that emotion of me that you hold and you're feeling and you're carrying with you every day, the only way you're going to let go of any of that is if I apologize and accept and acknowledge and understand and really show a display of contrition. That gives me control over your emotional state. And I don't think any of you want that. I don't think you want to grant somebody else control over your emotional state, which means that if we go the opposite direction, that means that you want to be in control of your emotional state. You want to be in control of those things. And this is the difference between forgiveness and reconciliation. And, a phrase that we've heard before, right? Forgiveness and forgetting. Because you've forgiven someone does not mean that they're not accountable. Because you've forgiven someone does not mean that they are somehow less responsible. It doesn't mean that they're off the hook. It doesn't mean that they don't pay a price for the consequences of their actions. It means none of those things. Again, this is just about you. So the simple skill of forgiveness in self-awareness. What do we want to be aware of? Well, there's two things we want to be aware of when we refuse forgiveness, and there's two things we want to be aware of in ourselves when we grant forgiveness. Number one, and I'm going again, you can see here, right? Look at, again, as always, so you guys know, look at my notes, okay? I am doing the work, right? Getting through my own notes. I wrote all this, but I'm writing notes, I'm circling, I'm going back into this. The two downsides of refusing forgiveness are this. Number one, when you hold grudges and you refuse forgiveness, you fixate on the real or perceived injustices of your life. And it promotes and drives and sometimes feeds a victim mindset. And that's a very dangerous place to be. So refusing forgiveness increases the likelihood that you fixate on real or perceived or invented injustices in your life. And then number two is refusing forgiveness. It keeps painful emotions alive, well-fueled, and highly, highly, highly relevant in your day-to-day life. Whereas when you grant forgiveness, and you can probably just do the corollaries of these, right? When you grant forgiveness, you fixate and you focus and you make room for the joys in your life. You make room for gratitude and appreciation, sometimes for lessons learned, sometimes for the painful lessons learned, and sometimes we forgive just so we can do number two, and that is this. When we forgive, we allow those injustices and the emotions that come along with them and the pain that comes along with them, we allow them to run their natural course. We allow them to exist, dissipate, fade, and then we make a decision to say, that is not something that I want to hold and anchor in my life. And we allow it to run its natural course and not stay in our life as a pain point and an open wound. We allow those wounds to fully heal so that we can get back to those things about our life that are the most meaningful and not let old pain create fresh problems. The second piece, which is control yourself. So know yourself, the self-awareness, and then self-control, right? This control yourself element is discipline forgiveness, right? The discipline of forgiveness, right? But forgiveness, it is a choice. And the more you see it as a choice and treat it as a choice, and then in yourself build this up to control yourself as forgiveness as a choice, the more you bring that power of yourself, right? You bring that capacity, that great human quality to make our own decisions regardless of what's going on around us or what has been done to us. We maintain that sense of control and self-reliance. And this is one of the most important areas to do it because there's not a lot we can do. There's some, but there's just not a lot we can do about people doing things that hurt us. And it will happen with people, and has already, with people who are close to you. It'll happen with people who don't know you. It will happen intentionally, and it will happen unintentionally. It will happen because of neglect and inattention. It will happen because of intention and specific things that people did. So we have to be ready, and we have to be willing to be in control around this forgiveness piece because we're going to get hurt. We're going to experience pain. And things are going to happen. We're going to be disappointed. People are going to let us down. We're going to be heartbroken. People are going to hurt our feelings, right? The normal stuff of life. And we can drift into this more victim mindset and this constantly being wronged, the constant injustices that come with us. And then if we pair that with a lack of self-control or an unwillingness to control ourselves, we now kind of move this lack of awareness about how much resentment and grudges are toxically invading us, and we don't ever take control of it. And so it's a very dangerous and emotionally lethal combo to not have awareness of what this is doing to us and then not have self-control to do something about it. Yeah, I looking at these notes here, that the other really big piece about self-control is I believe that withholding forgiveness, I believe it steals energy. I believe it actually does two things. I think one, it steals the good energy, and it fills or allows us to be contained in some part with the negative and that toxic energy. Whereas releasing that resentment, right, just opening the drain and letting it flow out, and then choosing that forgiveness, it fills us back, or at least makes room for this positive energy, which fuels even higher levels of self-control on really important pieces. And then the last one, so self-awareness, which is the know yourself, self-control, which is the control yourself, discipline yourself, and then the last one is self-confidence, and that is believe in yourself. Resentment is like having an anchor down while you are in turbulent seas. It is like being in a ship and still being anchored while a storm blows over you, and we're getting tossed about by the storm, and you're getting banged up, and you're not going anywhere, and you're getting hammered by it, but you can't get away from it. That's what resentment does. And eventually, like a ship that can't get its anchor loose in a storm, eventually that storm will pull you under. If you can't get that anchor released, and you can't move through those waters and get to calmer seas and get through that storm, eventually that storm, if you stay anchored within it, it will pull you under. And so will grudges and resentment. No matter how painful it is, or how painful you think it might be to forgive somebody, it will be more painful eventually for you to hold on to that, because it's going to pull you under. Whereas the opposite is true. The opposite is true, and that is, again, repeating. Forgiveness is the act of a warrior. It's an act of strength. And forgiveness is not a cowardly act. Forgiveness, and no matter what anybody else thinks, and a lot of people will have opinions, and that's why I'm a big fan, and I give everybody, like, it's not my job to give permission, so I use the word permission if only to hear somebody say it, right? You give yourself the permission, but I want to tell you, you can give yourself this permission at any time. Because you can forgive somebody, and it doesn't matter if anyone else understands. It doesn't matter if your family doesn't get why you forgave that person. It doesn't matter if your friends or your colleagues or anybody else understands why you forgave that person. And if you let other people know that you have forgiven somebody who has done something terrible, they will have opinions on what you should and shouldn't have done. But it's not about them. And so that's why I'm a big fan, and I tell people to give themselves permission to forgive privately. It's the only thing that matters. What you say and do to anybody else is none of your business or theirs. You can forgive privately. That is enough, because it does the job intended, and that job is focused on you. And that is the self-confidence that I would like you to be full of at the end of this, is the self-confidence to know that you can make that decision. It doesn't matter what anybody else thinks or if anybody else knows, because you've served the person who needed serving in that moment, and that is you. Just in closing, I'll say here, I've never heard of somebody who gave forgiveness and regretted it. That it might have happened. There are people who gave somebody second chances and regretted it, but that's different. I've never heard of somebody who gave forgiveness to somebody else and says, you know what? I really wish I hadn't forgiven them in my heart. I really regret that level of forgiveness and grace that I gave to somebody. And on the inverse, I've never heard of somebody who held a grudge for their life, who held resentment for their life, and got to the end of their life and said, I'm really glad I held that grudge forever. I'm glad that I kept that resentment in my heart and I held it until the end. I've never heard of either of those two things. And again, this is not a suggestion of what to do. This is me sharing my experience and my observation. I've not heard of those two. And what that tells me is that I have seen people on the other side who were sad and disappointed and regretted not giving forgiveness earlier. And I have seen people who regretted holding on to resentment for so long. both for themselves and sometimes for the other person. And I've seen that enough to know that's not a mistake that I want to make. That's not, I've seen enough other people, and frankly, I've done it myself long enough. It's not a mistake I want to repeat in my life. It's not a mistake that I want to make going down that path and going down that track. And so maybe tonight, maybe this, maybe today, whenever you're watching this, maybe this is just that message that you needed to hear. Being in the right place at the right time. Maybe this message is reaching you before you needed this, and that this is preparing you for some future moment of your life. It's probably both. And I'm just glad that it reached you. I'm glad that it's here. And if you think this message can help with anybody else, share this with them. Share this with them if you think it can help. Be a voice into them that maybe unlocks something and lets them put down a weight that they've been carrying for too long. So, the last comment again, I just in my notes here, I think this is just too good not to share with you guys. Across. I'm a historian, and a historian, that makes it sound formal. I like to read books of history, right? I got historical books here all on my desk and all on my bookshelf. They're mostly all old books. And if you read across all of history, what you'll find throughout history in any book, and you'll see in every race, in every religion, in every country, in every corner of the world, you hear the same thing. And that is that forgiveness is a confidence-building, heart-inspiring show of strength. And I think that says something to all of us. So I really appreciate you all listening. Appreciate you guys diving in, all of you, and being part of this tonight. And so let's jump into some Q&A. The crowd is active tonight. It's great to see all of you. I love all of you announcing where you're from. Because look, we've added. I'm gonna just want to go through here. Okay, let's pick up where we left off. Wabash, Indiana. Okay, we played against Wabash at Worcester. I think we split all of our games against those guys. We've got Sydney, Australia. We got Asheville, North Carolina, Charleston, South Carolina, Milwaukee. By the way, while I'm reading these, ask any questions, type Q&A into the chat, and ask any questions that you'd like to ask. Milwaukee, Merced, California, Colorado Springs, Pittsburgh, Ottawa, Washington Courthouse in Ohio. We've got the Villages in Florida. Westerville is in the house as well. Bexley, Ohio. Okay. All right, Bexley. All right, we got everybody. Okay, let's jump into some of these Q&A because I want to get to these, and I'm really curious about the questions that you have tonight. All right, Jeffrey asks, is there a way to get reps on practicing this discipline? Thinking more along the lines of a coach trying to help players work on this. Listen, I don't know. How do you get reps at forgiving? I think this is not an absolute, just my perspective. I think forgiveness is one of those where the emotional quality and component of this, that the context and dynamic of emotion about when we would need to give forgiveness, I think this is one of those life things that can only be practiced in the real. Right? It can only be practiced in the real. It's like I grew up in California, right? I grew up in California surfing, and you can try to practice surfing on small waves and on the beach or on the sand, right? You can practice all kinds of ways. But there is nothing where you can go out and you can practice and get reps for surfing a really large wave in really strong waters. There's not a way to do that, really. You could practice on small waves, but the dynamics are different. The stakes are higher in big waves. There's nothing that replicates the power of that wave coming. And I grew up, you have to paddle out and get into it. Now, I think part of the reps, if we were going to do reps, and maybe to continue the surfing analogy is, you probably don't want to paddle out into the biggest waves in the strongest water on the toughest day when you haven't surfed much before. And so it's going to be tough to give forgiveness if you don't have a really good grip on empathy and emotions and self-awareness and self-confidence and integrity. So there's a lot of things that I think we can build that lead us up into it. But with the true act of forgiveness when we've been hurt, the real scenarios are your practice ground, and those are the reps, and that makes every one of them matter. Jeff Finn, as a coach of high school girls whose entire existence is based on the internet, how do I influence forgiveness to bolster team morale? Well, first, Jeff, I get I think I get the sense of what you're saying, but I would say, I would encourage you maybe just to, and again, without having the context, I'm going to answer and trust the best intentions because I know that you have them. Young high school women have a large existence that is off the internet, right? There's a lot that is on the internet, but the dynamics on the internet are the same core dynamics in regular and day-to-day human life. We're sharing information, we're expressing ourselves, we're displaying certain stuff, and we want to be liked and we want to be validated. That's no different than why if we're looking at a 15-year-old young woman and a 50-year-old young woman, the 15-year-old is nervous and scared to post something to TikTok or Instagram or Snapchat and not get enough likes, as the 50-year-old woman is nervous to get up and speak in front of a group because her peers might judge her. It's the same dynamic. And for whatever reason, we tend to think that 15-year-olds on the internet are somehow a different set of rules than human rules than the 50-year-old who doesn't want to do public speaking because of how she looks. It's the same basic dynamic. They are presenting themselves, they look and feel a certain way, and they want to be seen a certain way by their peer groups. So I tend to be more humanist with this, and that is I look at people as people and look at what the rules are, like what the standards are of being a human being and cultural dynamics and peer pressure and social norms, and equip people with the tools they need for the environments that they're in. So, the specific question, how do you influence forgiveness to bolster team morale? I would not change from what we have laid out tonight. It's a choice. It's up to you. If you don't give it, it does a lot of damage to you and very little to them. And ultimately, you know this, if somebody doesn't forgive you, eventually we move on and go on with our lives, and we don't have that emotional anchor in us. If somebody else didn't forgive us, we move on and we go forward. If they're not going to grant forgiveness, we're pretty good at emotionally moving forward, or at least pushing that away. So I would teach the same dynamics that we've taught here tonight and teach it to 15-year-olds for the environments that they're living in. Help them deal with the internet better. Help them be better on TikTok with their friends. Help them be better on Instagram with their friends. Help them be more gracious. Help them be more kind. Help them be more, have more grace and flexibility. And when it's time to forgive, help them decide how to make that choice for themselves. Charlie, what's happening, man? Good to see you. Kind of see you. Sort of goes along with the above question. It may sound overly optimistic, Charlie says, but what are some of the actual mechanics of forgiveness? It might seem like a silly question. Charlie, it's not a silly question. I actually don't think there's a ton of mechanics involved in this. I actually think this is pretty simple. I think it is pretty basic. I think it's one decision away, and that's how I treat it. Somebody did something, it hurt, it's over. Somebody did something, it hurt, maybe for this reason, and it's over. If you want to get into the mechanics, Charlie, go to the previous skill that we did around emotion and get into the mechanics of emotions, because that's where the mechanics would lie. Forgiveness is just that very simple decision. It is the one decision to let go. It happened, it ran its course, and it can fade. And I don't need to carry it with me. Acknowledging that pain existed, why, what it meant, and then go from there. There's a lot of mechanics within the emotions piece. We won't reteach those tonight, but that's what you can go into, and that's what I would do. I would pair up this one and then use the foundation of what we taught in emotions to be those mechanics. But this one is pretty simple. Chris, I think this is just a comment that looks interesting. I've used strategies to label someone forgiven, but I just don't know how to really feel I've forgiven them. Resentment hangs on, and I beat myself up for this on the daily. Chris, I think there's a lot of people, and if you've ever felt like Chris, just out of curiosity, if you felt like this in the comments, literally write me in the comments. Chris said this. Chris said, again, just to make sure you heard what Chris said. I've used many strategies to label someone forgiven, but I just don't know how to really feel I've forgiven them. Resentment hangs on. I've beaten myself up for this on the daily. If you've ever felt that, just put me in the comments because Chris, I think that is common. That sounds really human to me, right? That sounds like something that we get into, and that you are far, far, far from alone on that. And part of that is that's why I want to simplify this and make sure that we see it's just a decision, and not to associate forgiveness with anything other than letting go of the pain in us. Right? That's really the simplest piece. Is I just want to let it go. I don't need to feel something positive. I don't need to feel this. And I think it's partly, if I dig into this, we start getting into maybe the more complex. And there's probably a lot into this, but we're keeping it simple, direct, and practical, functional, right? I think part of this is if I think about, when I've forgiven, who I've forgiven, what I've forgiven people for, it's not an acknowledgement that the pain never existed. It's not an acknowledgement that the act was never done. It's not pretending or forgetting that it ever happened. It's the ability to let go of that pain having a home inside of us. I mean, I can think of right now, I can think of 3 or 4 things I've forgiven people for. A couple of people close to me, some long things with family and personal and relational and all. I can think of those right now, and I can like see the things that happened, and I can see how we got to that, and I can see the pain that was there. And then I can see that, I made a decision. I made a decision that pain doesn't get to live inside of me. It doesn't get a home. It doesn't get to rent space. That pain can just be, that was something that I felt for a long time. And then I decided that pain didn't need to live in me. And I think sometimes we can equate forgiveness with replacing it with some specifically good feeling or feeling that is supposed to be there instead. And I don't know that there is. Maybe. But for me, it's not. For me, it's just letting go of pain having a home inside of me that I don't want to have a home inside of me, because I want space for all the great stuff. And I know there's plenty of pain coming in the future, and I don't want to get filled up with that stuff. That's how I think about it. Yeah, see, Chris, a bunch of people putting me in here. Okay, so let's keep going. A few more questions. And again, we'll stay here as long as there's some questions. I keep scrolling back up here. Okay. How to handle it when your child doesn't forgive you and doesn't want to be around you. You have asked for forgiveness. Okay, Sandra, this is the opposite side of the coin, obviously. And if what I'm saying is accurate, and I believe it is, that you and only you can choose forgiveness, that means that if you want forgiveness from somebody else, you do not have the power to make that decision. The most you can do is make a request, and then it's out of your hands. I love you. And that's painful sometimes, because we can't make people let go of something they're not ready or willing to let go of yet. And when we've done something that somebody else won't forgive us for, and we want them to, this is why apologizing does not grant forgiveness. It's a choice that the other person in this context has to make for themselves. The most you can do is make a request. And then from there, show love. From there, be gracious. From there, be patient and believe that they will come around. And they will do so on their own timeline. We've all made mistakes, and we've all probably been in the situation that you're describing in some way, shape, or form in an important relationship. And the most you can do is give love and be there and be a great person now. And that person will grant you forgiveness when they're ready. Can I touch more on the negative effects of not forgiving yourself, same as others? Yeah, it's the exact same thing as others. Not forgiving yourself, I would say is worse than not forgiving others in terms of its damage and its impact, because we become self-critical, we become self-doubt, we question ourselves in the future, we sap energy. In serious cases, it moves to a victim mindset that overwhelms and floods your life and can even push into a depressive state. and obviously get to some really, really dangerous places. Forgive yourself. Give yourself permission to do it the wrong way before you do it the right way. The worst critic for most of us, right? The worst critic is ourselves. Don't be your worst critic. And the way I phrase this, if you've heard me say this before, self-awareness without self-judgment. That's what we're aiming for. Self-awareness without self-judgment. Oh, okay, I see, Barth. Different Wabash. Wabash College is gotcha. Okay, I see. Well, I was thinking of Wabash, Indiana, who was in the NCAC when I was playing college football there. So, Braden, you asked about forgiving yourself. I would not. I would say the same thing. Okay. All right. I see you, Jeff. Not Wabash College. Cool. Gotcha. Kent, would I say that a person has to stop chasing and controlling for acceptance and approval from others, which is a choice, and anchoring it to yourself for approval and acceptance? Yes, I 100% would. It's not about anybody else's approval. I think the number one thing we have to do is choose to be the person that we want to be and live by the standards we want to live by. I think we decide who is important to us and how to serve those people. And I believe chasing approval is a fruitless endeavor. I think it's a foolish pursuit, personally. And I think these two things can go hand in hand. I do think they have a relationship. All right, John Perry, I see you. You're up in Missouri. All right, you made that Mississippi to Missouri move. I got you. Okay, couple more here. What are some questions you can ask yourself when in forgiveness situations? Some questions to ask myself. I think the questions start to get dangerous because I think who was asking this? Alex Shield in Sydney, Australia, I think. I think the questions we can ask ourselves within forgiveness start getting a little tricky because I think we start asking questions like, did they mean to do this? What was their intent when they did this? Did they do this on purpose? And most of the time, however we answer that, that's just the answer we made up, not reality. But we think it's reality. You've been in enough conversations like I have. People say, oh, they meant to do this. And you don't know. It's like when somebody cuts you off on the road. It's like, well, they meant to do that. It's like, you don't know. You're just mad and you're saying they meant to do it. So I don't know that questions are the way to go about that necessarily with somebody else. I think the only questions to ask are for yourself is holding on to this good for me? Is holding on to this adding value to their lives, teaching them a lesson that they're going to learn and be better because of? Do I want to feel like this forever? Do I have to feel like this? I think those are the core key questions. And I think as we answer those, we'll start to get a sense of, what we want, what will be useful, what will be not. I think those are the core questions, but really it's less about the questions and it's more about, the decisions. And I don't know that the questions around forgiveness are as relevant. I think the questions come in around the emotions, right? What happened? What was the impact? What story am I telling myself? What am I feeling? Why? And then how do I direct this in a way that benefits me? I think those are the questions, but those are more emotion questions than true forgiveness questions. Okay, let's see. Yeah, you're welcome, Charlie. Absolutely. Congrats on wrapping up your semester, man. Let's see. Any more questions? Eric, I like this one. Eric Reynolds said he heard it phrased, forgiveness is setting someone free, and then later on finding out it was you. And I love that. I absolutely agree. A couple more questions, and then we are wrapped up for the night. Thanks for sticking around, everybody. Steve, you've spoken about when you have a good culture, you can tell the truth. What advice do you have to help players on a team tell their peers the truth without being hurtful and then needing forgiveness? I think this, in terms of telling the truth, I think way too many people worry about hurting feelings when they're telling things, and they get way more concerned about hurting feelings when dealing with the truth than they do about saying the truth. I was just, and this is actually in, if you on my YouTube channel, there's a keynote, there's a session I did around complaining for the football team at UCLA where we talked about this. And one of the questions was, how do you hold people accountable and tell the truth on the team without them getting upset? And I said, you don't. But the problem is we get worried about people being upset, and then you use the fact that somebody might get upset to cause you to not tell the truth. Look, if the debate is between tell the truth or people don't get upset, you tell the truth. If you get upset at the truth, that's a you issue. Now, if you get upset because I delivered it in a way without care, without concern, or I delivered it when I didn't have credibility, or I delivered it in a way that was not skillful, well, that's obviously partly on me, right? But it also might be that you're going to attack the way I delivered it because you know it's true. So the first thing is commit to the truth above all, right? And the way I phrase it, and you guys hear this with me, and you can hold me to this standard, is I'm going to tell the truth with love. I mean, honestly, for all of you, I mean, I really, I'm going to tell you what I believe to be true, and I'm going to put it on the table. I do this all the time. If you get your feelings hurt because I said a truth that hit a little bit too close to home, that's something that you're going to have to wrestle with, not me. I want to deliver it, but what? The truth, but what? I want to deliver it with love. I want you to know that I care. I want to earn the right to deliver those hard truths. And so that's what we want to communicate to players in how to talk to their teammates. Truth with love. Don't ever sacrifice the truth because you love somebody, and don't ever love somebody so much that you're unwilling to tell them the truth because it might sting. Put both of those things together and worry less about whether or not somebody likes it or doesn't like it. That's not the issue. The issue is standards, care, love, and if we got to go through some hard stuff and you got to deal with the fact that you don't like that I said that, good luck working through that. I'll be right here with you when you're ready to get back on track and hold the standards. And I'll be here to support you the whole way. I love you, even if it stings. Last question, Beatrice. What about forgiveness versus revenge? Revenge gives a sense of power. Yeah, I think we've seen enough movies at this point to know that revenge is one of those things that, in the pursuit of it, it's kind of like an emotion, right? When that spark for revenge is lit, we think it's all we want. It burns brighter and brighter and brighter. And then once we get that revenge, there's some kind of sweet moment maybe where it flames up, and then it goes away. And in the absence of that flame of revenge, there is a void and an empty cavern, and we realize we are in a deep, dark pit of our own creation. And so don't even light that match. Don't even let that blaze start. Start with forgiveness first and realize that there's really no such thing as revenge that helps you. There's only living your best life, and it's not about whether anybody else sees it. It's about you. It's not about them. Everybody, thank you so much for being here tonight. This has been fantastic. This has been amazing. I think this has been my favorite one yet, and it's been the longest one, 43 minutes. And there's so many of you who have stayed here throughout. I cannot tell you. I can, because I'm going to. I am so grateful for the fact that you watch any of these, let alone multiple or all of them, and that you're here tonight with your time until 9:15 on the East Coast time. I appreciate you all so much. I love you all. I care about you all. I'm grateful to be able to contribute to you all, and to be able to do this for you all and with you all is one of the real joys of my life. This is not a job for me. This is a calling, and this is a mission. And as long as you guys are getting value in here for it, I will be here to deliver it. That said, tomorrow we are going to jump into and flip to a lighter topic, but an equally important one, and that is the simple skill of flexibility. And I don't mean stretching. I don't mean physical performance. I mean flexibility in life. How do you be somebody who can move with the ups and downs and patterns and flow of life and maintain a level of flexibility that allows you to be functional with a lot of people in a lot of situations in interacting with a wide, diverse set of circumstances, people, and styles. And so until tomorrow, I appreciate you all. Have a great night.